And so life without God is tragic. It's meaningless. Because one day all of it's gone. But with God and eternity, we may not have all the answers, but life is not empty. God infuses meaning into our life. I've titled the sermon today, Living When Life Feels Fragile. And this has been a week where death feels close. We had, as I opened up my phone this week, trying to keep up with the news, one of the first things I saw this week was, the Ukrainian war, Russia-Ukrainian war, again, just continuing to build up and become all that it is. Poland said it's the closest it's ever been to war since World War II. And then reading in the news about the Gaza war, Israel sending their soldiers in to be able to try to stop what's happening, and the famine and the killing and the death. And I'm like, just more death, right? And then I wake up one of the mornings and my wife says, hey, did you see that story or that video of the woman on the train? I said, no. And I wish I would have just listened to her describe it instead of trying to find the video and seeing the graphic images of this woman, Irina, 23-year-old Ukrainian woman, stabbed on a public train. Then there was the Colorado shooting this week of somebody went into a school and once again shot some children, and more death and more heaviness. And of course, seemed like the biggest story this week, news-wise, the political assassination of Charlie Kirk, that really shook and rattled the nation. People feel very strongly about it, but more death. And the headlines remind us of something, that life is fragile. I got a call last week on a more personal level from one of our pastor's wives. And she called me and said, and many of you guys know Pastor Tony and have heard the news, and if not, you'll hear it now, but she said, Pastor Tony's going in for a surgery, and, I want you guys to pray for him. So we as an elder team came around, we prayed for Pastor Tony, and after the surgery, he had some basically complications, if you want to say it that way, and ended up in the ICU, hooked up with all of these, contraptions, on life support, dialysis because of his kidney trying to kick in, and all of this stuff going on. It's not looking good. Me and my father went over there, went into the ICU, and it's hard to see someone that you've seen so healthy and so full of life laying in a hospital bed, holding on for their dear life. And talking with their wife that you've known, this couple, pastoral couple, for my entire life, and seeing him at a point where when we went in to pray for him, he was conscious for maybe 5 seconds and turned to my father as my father was talking, and just a tear went down his eye. It's hard to see those things. And but a day or two later, getting a call calling Linda after I heard that Pastor Tony wasn't doing so well, and she picked up. I said, I heard he's not doing well. How's he doing? And she said, he's passed. Then 5 minutes of his passing. And death is heavy. I felt it last week. I don't usually feel like I'm that affected by the news as much and this, but it just felt like everything was piled on at once. And I was driving into the gym early in the morning, and the first thing I'm thinking about, I woke up with this heaviness of just death, thinking about Tony and Linda and life. And I'm playing this passage because we're going through a series in Ecclesiastes. We're starting, and I'm playing Ecclesiastes, and I'm driving to the gym, but I'm not really thinking about the Bible. You ever do that? I'm confessing. I'm playing it, but I'm thinking about death and all of this heaviness, and I'm thinking, why, God? Why does all of this happen? I don't understand. Sometimes it's like, why wouldn't he have more time? He's a godly guy, and I'm wrestling with this. And the chapter of Ecclesiastes 9 restarts, and I hear the words that I'm going to share with you today, and I was ministered to it. When we experience death and brokenness in our world, in our personal lives, in our city, in our country, we can easily slip into discouragement and see the darkness of our world and only the darkness of our world. But Ecclesiastes is going to remind us that instead of living in despair, we can live with purpose and joy in the midst of it. Today, I want to answer this question for all of us is, how do we as Christians handle death? It's going to come our way. It's going to come to all of us. But how do we handle it when it comes into our life? If you're taking notes this morning, we'll be in chapter 9. I want to give you your first point this morning to help us understand how we handle death. Here's the first thing that Solomon teaches us. When life feels fragile, God holds you steady. Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 1 says this. This is Solomon speaking. This too I carefully explored. Even though the actions of godly, this is what I listened to that morning, and wise people are in God's hands, no one knows whether God will show them favor. The same destiny awaits everyone, death. Whether religious or wicked, good or bad, ceremonially clean or unclean, religious or irreligious, good people receive the same treatment as sinners. And people who make promises to God are treated like people who don't. I want to give some context before we unpack this idea of our world being fragile, but God is, still in control and sovereign. As we dive into this book, let me ask this question. How many of you have ever read the book of Ecclesiastes? It is for face value, if you read the book without any context, it feels like a very depressing book. I have no problem saying that. And part of the problem is that what Solomon's doing is he's taking all of these different things. Solomon was a king in Israel. He was the son of David, a man after God's own heart. And Solomon is considered and known as the wisest man that ever lived. He's a king that had everything at his disposal. And he wrote this book to go over all the different areas in life that people try to find meaning in. And what chapter after chapter Solomon wants to do is he wants to deconstruct those things. You try to find meaning in wealth, let me break that down and show you how meaningless that is. You want to try to find meaning in achievements, let me break that down. You want to try to find meaning in wisdom, let me break that down. And what he wants to do is show us this, that apart from God, life is meaningless and empty. That's his goal. Now, the challenge when you're reading the book, if you don't know that, is he's writing from a perspective that's kind of cynical and negative. He's writing from a perspective of someone that doesn't think there's an eternity, doesn't live like there's an eternity, and doesn't live like there's a God. So a lot of the things he's saying, his motto throughout the book is everything is meaningless. I've never seen anybody tattoo that verse on their body. I've never seen it posted on anybody's Instagram. This is my life verse. And what he's saying, though, with that is he wants us to understand that the reason he's saying that is because without God and without eternity, everything is meaningless. And so he's going through all these areas. So we jump into chapter 9. Now he's going to talk about how death and life feel so meaningless. And so the first thing he says here, really, that he teaches us, it brings our attention to, is that death comes to everyone. He says, whether you're successful, whether you're religious, or whether you're clean. Hey, listen, death doesn't care what your area code is. Death doesn't care what your hair color is. Death doesn't care how much money you have in the bank. Death doesn't care how religious you are. Death doesn't care how obedient you are to God. Death doesn't care, Solomon says, how clean you live or how unclean you live. Death comes to all of us. It is the great equalizer. And what's difficult sometimes is that we have a hard time wrapping our mind around the idea that people die. It's not something that any of us enjoy or like experiencing and going through, but here's what we do. Sometimes when people die, we go, I don't understand it. They were such a good person. They loved God. They lived for things that matter. I ask myself these same questions. God, why would you take someone like Pastor Tony when 10, 15 more years, he could make such a bigger difference for you? Why would you allow his life to end there. And so what Solomon's trying to teach us here, though, is that death comes to everyone. Ultimately, it waits for all of us. And here's what we need to remember. That doesn't matter how godly you live or how righteous you live, we still have things that happen to us. And so what Solomon wants to teach us is circumstances don't prove or disprove God's love for us. He says we don't know whether God will show them favor. Listen, you may have gotten the worst doctor's report you could have possibly imagined this week. Let me tell you this, God still loves you. You may have lost your job this week or lost all of the business that you needed to get through this next season. That is not because God doesn't love you. Sometimes we make those lines when something goes bad in our family or in our job or our health, and we say, God, how could you do this to me? I'm a Christian, I'm following you. Like, bad things never happen to Christians. Hey, listen, tell John the Baptist that. The greatest prophet in the Old Testament, the guy that goes, Jesus is the way, I'm making the way, I'm not even worthy to carry this dude's sandals, beheaded. And we wrestle with that, like, why, God, would you take somebody that's good and that's making a difference and that's pointing the way? Wouldn't they have made a bigger difference? And we won't understand all of those things, but what Solomon's telling us is don't judge your circumstances and draw your circumstances to God's love or God doesn't love you. There are people that deeply love God and God is crazy about them, that have sickness in their life, that go through hard times, they get paralyzed, that have all types of things happen, and it doesn't mean that God doesn't love you. And Solomon points to this reality of death that we have to experience: wicked, good, bad, clean, unclean. And he's pointing to tell us that life is fragile, but listen, life is fragile, but life is in God's hands. God can protect us, God can keep us, God can preserve us. And listen, and sometimes God goes, it's your time. Do you know that not everything that you go through that's hard in your life or that's suffering in your life is from God? Sometimes it's just life. Sometimes it's the devil. And sometimes it's our own decisions. You know, listen, this is a joke. If you eat McDonald's and Portillo's, and I love both of those places, all this, and then 40 years later you have diabetes, and you say, God, why'd you do this to me? Maybe we made some decisions there that help lead us to experience something, right? In other words, we have a part to play in it as well. But sometimes God as well does go, hey, listen, I am going to insert some pain in your life because God loves you enough that he wants to shake you out of the place that you're at. And so God will use the tool of pain and suffering. Sometimes God does bring that storm into your life because he loves you so much that he doesn't want to keep you the way that you are. And so he will shake you with some pain and suffering because it's the only way to get your attention. So what is Solomon teaching us? Those are some of the principles, but what do we do with this? Well, don't assume following God means a pain-free life. The Bible says God disciplines those that he loves. That one of his marks of his love with you is that when you're walking the wrong way, he will bring something in your life to bring you back. And that is not because God hates you. That's because he deeply loves you. That's a mark of his love for you. So don't assume that because you follow Jesus, you will never go through any suffering. Actually, the opposite is promised to us, that because we follow Jesus, we will suffer. We will go through hard times. But we're also encouraged that while we suffer, we have Jesus' presence with us no matter what we go through. Here's another thing that we need to remember, that we need to trust his plan even when suffering comes. There will be times in your life when you go through things where you just cannot possibly understand, that happened to you, that happened to your family, that happened in our world, and you'll just say, your world will be rocked, and your faith will be shaken. Our job is not to understand everything and always why something happens. Some things we will not understand until the other side of eternity. Our job is to trust God when we don't understand. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all of your ways acknowledge him and he will make your path straight. There are times when I will not understand God, but I go, God, I know your heart, so I'm gonna lean. I don't understand it, but I know your heart, so I'm gonna lean on you. And I'm gonna be obedient to you even when I don't. I'm gonna keep my joy even when I don't understand. Romans 8:28 says, and we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. 2 Corinthians 1:3, blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our afflictions. I want you to know this. When we experience death, when we experience pain, when we experience suffering, that God can use anything that's bad in our life and squeeze good out of it into our life. Anything. Anything. Anything that's bad, something you wish never happened, I want you to know God didn't want that to happen to you, but let me say this, God can use that and squeeze that bad thing so that good still pours out into your life. That's how big and powerful he is. But he also is a God who self-identifies himself as a God of comfort. He's not just a God of power that can squeeze bad into good. He's a God of comfort. And my most profound and spiritual moments with God have not been in a room with my hands raised in a worship band. It has been in quiet places when I am grieving and feeling pain, and God has entered into my situation with comfort. And so when our life feels fragile and we're shaken, we need to remember that our God is still in control. Our God is still sovereign. We may not always understand why he's doing, but listen, he is not in a good versus evil battle with the devil. The devil has already been defeated at the cross. We are just waiting for it to be over. We're just waiting right now. Start the clock. The battle has already been won. Jesus has already won the battle. And so know that he can hold us steady. Here's the second thing that we need to remember when we experience hardship and death in our life is when time feels short, choose what matters most. Ecclesiastes chapter 9 verse 4 says this, there is hope only for the living. As they say, it is better to be a live dog than a dead lion. The living at least know they will die, but the dead know nothing. They have no further reward, nor are they remembered. Whatever they did in their lifetime, loving, hating, envying, all is gone. They no longer play a part in anything here on earth. Once again, Solomon is giving a perspective of somebody that thinks that when you die, it all goes black. You just go back to dust. It's nothing after you die. And so if your perspective on life is that when you die, nothing happens, it's a very, very bleak way and dark way to live life. Solomon here is comparing life and death and saying, hey, look at the benefits of being alive versus the benefits of death. If you're dead, you can't do anything else. Your story is over. And I want you to hear this. If you may be in the room and be contemplating, we don't always think about these things, but I want to challenge you to contemplate it in this moment, that what do you think happens after death? If you, like the person that Solomon is giving the perspective of, believe that there is no God and that after life it all goes black and we're all back to dust or stardust, if death is all that there is, then death wipes away everything. If death is all that there is, then what is the point of you spending 60 years building a company? If death is all that's the point, Solomon says in another chapter, what's the point of gaining all this wealth to give it over to somebody that doesn't have the skills to keep it and didn't earn it? So it's meaningless. If death is all the point, if this all just ends after death, then why should I treat people right? How do you have objective morality if there is no God? If all it is after this is death, then what do you deal with are the people that do all these crimes, the Jeffrey Epsteins of the world that have crime after crime and die in jail? without feeling justice for what they've done. Well, he just got off. He's dead. He's dust. That's a worldly point of view. The biblical view is that after death, there is life. That after death, there is judgment. That things that may have gotten by here on earth will not get by the almighty seeing eye of God. And so what Solomon's saying here is the dead cannot do anything more on earth, and if you're dead, you no longer have the opportunity to act, love, or influence. Why does this matter for our life? Let me tell you this. What Solomon's telling us is reverse this. Make the most of your limited time here on earth. Solomon's saying, you're right, after death, you can't do things on earth that you did before. So you need to make sure that if there's something that you need to say, that you say it. That if there's someone you need to forgive, that you stop waiting for some point in the future that you think you're promised that you're not. That I'm just gonna wait to start living for God once I'm done building my business, or I'm through with college, or when I have some season in the future when I don't have as much responsibility, then I'm gonna really give and live and sell my soul out to God and give everything like you and me are promised tomorrow. Listen, you may not be promised an opportunity after today to talk with that person that deeply hurt you and make things right. You may not have another opportunity. Do you understand that me and you, I can drive home down Pulaski and be driving. Doesn't matter if I love God, serve the church, give, I do all that stuff. It doesn't matter that I could drive down Pulaski and get T-boned and my story could be done today. And God is still good if my story's done today. I am not promised this afternoon. I'm not promised tonight. I'm not promised that I get to see my kids grow up and get married. I'm not promised that, yet we tell ourselves that we're all gonna die old in a bed, in our sleep in a comfortable way. And yet we know that's not the truth. Psalms 90 verse 12 says, teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. In other words, we're not promised all of these days, so live every day like it matters. Focus on what truly matters: faith, family, forgiveness, and obedience. Be present. My wife has been teaching me, she's in the back, hi Carolina. My wife has been teaching me a lot. But one of the things she's been teaching me is to be present, because I have a hard time. I've struggled with being present, and I'm doing better now, but I would come home after an intense phone call and immediately walk into the house. Have both of my boys run and grab my legs. Hey, Dad, and they want to play. And as we'll go into the living room, she'd see me do this stare where I'm just staring off, thinking about work, solving problems in my head. Oh, my body is present, but I'm not present with my family. And she'd say, what are you doing? And I'd go, oh, just thinking about something. And I'm missing out on those moments that I will never be able to get back. And Solomon's telling us, hey, listen, you can't change your time, but you can change your priorities. Focus on what matters. Don't just live your life for entertainment and distractions. Those things are not bad, but your life and my life is so short, and the days may feel long, but the years are short. And they will go by. Your story may be shorter than you think, so squeeze everything you can out of it. And as a Christian, we don't just live for entertainment and fun. We live because we know that there is an afterlife. We live for that afterlife and the king that rules in that afterlife. We live for King Jesus. And let me ask you, what are you doing now that will last for all eternity? How are you living in a way that will honor God and bring glory to him and store up treasure, not for yourself here on earth where it can be destroyed, but store up for yourself a treasure in heaven that cannot be destroyed? It changes if you live your life only for the here and now and think you have all this time versus changing and knowing that eternity is before you and we are not promised tomorrow. Death reminds us to stop wasting time on what doesn't matter and focus on what does. Number 3, Solomon finishes with this insight. When the world feels heavy, treasure everyday joys. Solomon says in verse 7, so go ahead, eat your food with joy and drink your wine with a happy heart, for God approves of this. Wear fine clothes with a splash of cologne. Notice he said splash. Some of you on your way to church are like, Lord, anoint me with this. We smell you 10 feet before you walk into the church. We want the aroma of God. Your aroma's great, but live happily with the woman you love through all the meaningless days of life. Meaningless is the word hevel here in Hebrew. It's the idea of smoke or vapor. It looks solid, but you can't grab it. That God has given you under the sun. The wife God gives you as your reward for all your earthly toil. Whatever your hand finds to do it with all your might. For in the realm of the dead, when you're dead, where you are going, there is neither work, nor planning, nor knowledge, nor wisdom. Solomon finishes by showing us that we can have joy in the everyday life. He says, death is inevitable. Absolutely. All of us one day, that is one of the things that we have absolutely certain for us in this life. We will all die. All of us. But that doesn't mean that you can't enjoy life. And Solomon calls us to enjoy God's everyday gifts. It's interesting that he doesn't say, hey, joy is only found in expensive or luxury or exotic things. No, he shows us that anybody, no matter what their wealth or their income, no matter where they live, can enjoy the simple everyday pleasures of life that bring unbelievable joy. He points to some of these. He talks about meals. He said, eat your food with joy and drink your wine with a happy heart. Here he's talking about both meals and relationships. The Jewish people would never have a meal without having their family around them. It was always tied together. So he's saying, hey, listen, part of the joy that God has designed our world for you to experience comes from you sitting around the table with people that you love and eating food and having simple conversations about your day and about your life and about your dreams and about your aspirations and your fears. And those moments that oftentimes we are so disconnected from and looking at everything else on our phone, God says that in that moment is where you find joy. That we find joy in close relationships with people that we care about. That we find joy in things like the institution of marriage, where someone is close. And listen, you may feel like, I do not find any joy in my marriage right now. And can I tell you, you may feel like your marriage is a burden right now, but that doesn't mean that you can't turn your marriage around. That doesn't mean you can't restore your marriage. That doesn't mean you can't find joy even as you guys are trying to fix things. That doesn't mean that you can't bring your relationship to the best place it's ever been. In God, God can restore and bring back anything that the enemy has tried to steal. But I also want to say this. If you're widowed, if you're single, if you have no desire to be married, that doesn't mean that you have less joy in your life. Jesus wasn't married. Paul wasn't married and experienced the fullness of joy that came from God. He also mentions, get ready, that work is one of those things that we find joy in. A lot less applause. Reread the verse, Pastor. I don't think it's right. Listen, there are so many people that have a faulty view of what happened in the garden. They think that after Adam and Eve sinned, that the curse that God introduced was God said, now you're gonna have to work all your life. Wrong. Adam already was working and Eve was already working before they fell and they sinned. Work was not the curse. The difficulty of work was the curse. That God said it's gonna be a lot harder now that you work. So it was easier before the fall. After the fall, women, you got, childbirth pain. Men, hard work was part of our challenge we got. I don't know if that seems even or not, but that's how God wrote it. But let me tell you this, work is not a curse. Here, let me bring it home for you. If you view work as a curse, you will never find joy in the beauty of work. If you always view it as, I have to do this horrible thing, I gotta go, I gotta do it. Can I tell you, there's the job that you wish that you didn't have right now, somebody else is praying for that job. And I don't know, you say, but you don't know my boss, Pastor. I don't. But I'll tell you what, I don't know your boss in the office that you work for, but I do know your boss of your soul. The one that you ultimately work for. The one that you ultimately give excellence for. I don't know who writes your check. I don't know who you are directly under management-wise, but I'll tell you this. I do know your boss, who's the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, who said he will always provide for you, who does have a great heart, who will take care of you, who will protect you in work situations. And so I want you to be aware of this, that part of what Solomon's saying, he's saying work and do it with all that you have. That means strength, that one day you may not have the strength to do the job that you're doing right now. Just can't stand my job. I think work, sometimes you need to find different work, is something that God has given us to bring joy. That's what the Bible's teaching us. You know, there's a study in New York that was done that men that retired in New York over the age of 65, that within 2 years, 50% of them were dead. That was shocking to me when I read it. But I think part of what that's teaching us is not that from 65 to 67, you just get exponentially older. I think it's showing us that work provides joy and value to our life. That maybe you need to retire from your job one day, but maybe don't retire and go on the golf course and kick your feet up only at a beach. That God has given you breath in your lungs so that for whatever time he's given you the next 20 or 30 years of your life, that you will make a massive difference and use every breath that you have in your lung to make a difference with your life, to make a difference with your gifts, to not sit back and waste your life and say, now I get to enjoy eternity, but that, like Dr. Chapman, that you would cross that finish line giving everything that you have for the kingdom. So Solomon is teaching us that, yeah, life will be heavy, but there are joys that we can treasure. And I love this final thought I'll share with you. He teaches us that ordinary life is a gift from God that should not be taken for granted. Where does he say that? Well, Solomon says here, he says, wear fine clothes. The NIV says, always wear white garments and olive oil. Now, white garments is a symbol for joy. And olive oil, we don't do it this way anymore. Maybe people do, I don't know, I don't. But they would put it on as perfume in that day. And so it's the same. What he's saying is, listen, every day, always be able to find joy in the ordinary things that you do. People would wear these white garments when they were experiencing a big celebratory special event. And it's like us wearing if you're a man, you're wearing a suit and a tie. Somebody shows up to a suit and your tie, and it's like the everyday dinner. They say, what are you going to? What's the occasion? You have something, you're dressed in a special way. You must be experiencing something special soon. And what Solomon's saying is, don't just wait for a few moments in your life to say, that was really special. But in everything that you do, in all of your day-to-day relationships, at your work, in your hobbies, in the word, at the gym, make sure that you're finding joy in all of the everyday things. So stop waiting for perfect and start celebrating the present. Hey, there may be things that you're ambitious for and that you want and you can't wait. And listen, that's all good. But are you going to wait for your joy to have all of those things for you to experience the joy that God's called you to? Or maybe the joy is in the journey as God's taking you to experience those things that you're praying for. And we know as a Christian that the ultimate joy that we have is in Christ. 1 Peter 1:8-9 says, though you have not seen Jesus, you love him. And even though you do not see him now, you believe in him and are filled with an inexpressible and glorious joy. For you are receiving the end result of your faith, the salvation of your souls. Hey, listen, you may feel like everything in your life is going wrong right now. You may feel like everything is falling apart. The house of cards is crumbling. You may feel discouraged and down, but there are always things in your life to be thankful for. always things in your life that you can find joy in. And the greatest thing that could never be taken from us that creates inexpressible and glorious joy is the fact that you are a son or daughter of the Most High, washed and cleansed of all of your sins. Now listen to me. When we go through tough seasons or I go through hard things, I remind myself that this is not my home. That what the Bible says is I am an alien or a foreigner here, that I am simply passing through. And that my home, even though I was born in Chicago, that is not my home. Oh, I love Chicago, but my home I have never visited before. It is a place called heaven that is both a city and a country that has been designed by Jesus Christ himself. And more important to me than my citizenship in America is that I am a citizen of heaven, that I belong to Jesus Christ himself, that I can never be separated from his love. Even death cannot strip me from the love of Jesus Christ. And when I understand what he's done for me and how he's washed me and how he's adopted me and how he's empowered me and how he's made me new, how can I not be filled with joy in him? And so life without God is tragic. It's meaningless. Because one day all of it's gone. But with God and eternity, we may not have all the answers, but life is not empty. God infuses meaning into our lives.